Hello guys, and welcome to this reactjs tutorial. In this tutorial we will be making a to-do list. So this is the application, as you can see, and we can add to-dos. For example, do the laundry, and we can check them as completed, as you can see, and we can delete them as well. Okay, so let's get started. Before we get started, I just wanted to say that I have co-created a few Udemy courses and Skillshare courses, so the links to those are going to be in the description below, and we will be releasing a reactjs course soon. Be on the lookout for that. Please like and subscribe. Now let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is create our React app. So let's go ahead and go to our workspace in here. So my one is in Documents, and then React YouTube here. So we want to go back and then open our workspace in the terminal. So new terminal at folder. And then to create our project, our React app, we need to do npx create React app. And this would create the React app for us. And then we put in the name of the project, which is going to be to-do list. And then click enter. Okay, so as you can see, the project was created. So now if we go to our workspace, React YouTube, as you can see, we have a to-do list folder, and it has all of our stuff over here. So let's go ahead and open this inside our code editor. For me, it's going to be Visual Studio Code. So open folder, to-do list, and open. Okay, so first thing we want to do is actually run this app. So some of you might get an error like me. So if I do npm start, that's how you run the app, I get this error, as you can see. So to fix this is you just do a new file, .env. So you will store your environment variables in this file. So we're going to do skip pre-flight check, and we're going to set that to true. And now this should be fixed. As you can see, it's loading. And there you go, it's working. So reactjs just gives you this once you just install the project. Okay, so there's going to be a few files we don't need over here. So app.test.js, we don't want that. Index.css, logo.svg, and setup.test.js. So we can delete all of those. And we're going to get some errors because index.js uses index.css, and we just deleted that, so it's going to give us an error. We also get another error because of logo.svg is being used in app.js, which is this logo that is being animated, as you saw. And then so we can delete that. And also logo over here is being used, so let's remove that. And now it should work. Okay, what's this issue? Oh, I think we need to run it again. There we go. Okay, so now let's get started. So just to explain, index.js is the main file for this React project. So it imports the app component, which is going to be our main component, and index.js takes the app component, whatever's inside it, and gets the element, which is root, which is inside index.html, this one, div id root. So it gets this element and stores and puts all of our JSX inside this root element, and then that's how everything is rendered. Okay, so first thing we want to do is delete all of this code inside our app.js. We don't need this. Also this class name app, and import app.css. So this is importing all the styles over here, our CSS styles, and this comes with React. So I'm going to delete everything for now, because I don't want to bore you, so I'm not gonna actually do the styling. I'm just gonna, you can just copy paste it from my GitHub. I'm gonna put source code in the link, a link in the description. So I'm just gonna go copy paste it right now. Okay, so I've pasted all my styles. It's not that many, but yeah. So just copy paste these over here. So I don't want to bore you with all the styling. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is give this div some styling. So I have a style on app.css called to do app over here. I'm just going to give that for the to do. So class name equals to do app. So JSX is like HTML, just that you can use JavaScript with it, and it would be classed inside HTML, but in JSX it's class name. So there's a few differences. Okay, so as you can see, we have this from this class name to do app, and we also want to create our first component. So we're going to make a source folder, new folder, call it components. So over here we're going to store all of our components. Okay, so the first component we want to make is the actual form, the input where the user adds his to do, and the button as well where he clicks add to do. So let's make a new file and we'll call it to do form.js. And I'm just going to do RFC. So this just creates a React functional component, and to do this you need to install an extension. It's called ES7 React Redux GraphQL React Native Snippets. I really recommend this. It helps out a lot with coding, with the reactjs coding. So it just made me a functional component. Otherwise you would have to import React from React and then do the functional component yourself and return everything. So just do this. And all I want to do is actually import this to do form component, this one, inside app.js. So to do form, and this is how we use the component. So it automatically imported for me. If it didn't automatically import it for you, just import it like this. So import to do form from /components, which is the path /to do form. And then we need to close this just like this. And now if I put like a hello world here, as you can see it's displayed over here. So we're basically just importing whatever's to do form and putting it inside app.js, and app.js is being rendered inside index.js, which is being put in the root div inside index.html. So app.js to do form. So over here we want to have a h1 that just says to do list, so it's going to be our title. So to do list, and this h1 is styled in app.css. So as you can see it's big and it has a font, and it's kind of bold. Okay, so we can remove that hello world in to do form, and now let's actually start creating our input. Okay, so let's remove all this and just do form and put our input inside here. So when the person submits this form, it would create our to do, but we're going to do that later. And yeah, and we're going to give this a class name of to do form, and the input will give it a class name of to do input. To do input, and let's see how that looks. As you can see, this is our input. The form doesn't show, it's just going to be used to check if the person has submitted this input, so clicks enter, or we're going to have a button that submits the form. Yes, and then when he submits it, we'll call a function that creates the to do. So let's create the button as well. So button, and the class name is going to be to do button. To do button. As you can see, we have a button here, and let's just put add to do. Add to do. There we go. So the first thing we want to do to this input is actually give it a placeholder. So we want to tell the person to add it to do. So let's do that. So we'll go on the input placeholder equals add a to do. As you can see, it says add a to do over here. And then we can write whatever we want, and that goes. Okay. So now we want to create a state. So let's actually do that. I'll explain this in a bit. So const, and then make an array, and this is going to be a input, and then set input equals useState. useState is a React hook, so I'll explain that just 1 second. And it's going to be set to an empty string. So just import this as well. Set useState, so from React useState. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're creating a state, which is the input, and this input is pretty much like a variable for this component. It's a dynamic global variable, you can say, something like that. And this set input is a function that you call to change this variable. So that's what it's going to be. And once this is rendered, the state is going to be automatically set to an empty string. So whatever you put in here, so it could be an empty array, it could be null, it could be false, up to you. But for now, we're just going to set it as an empty string. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is actually change this input, the value of this input, based on what the person has put inside the input. So whatever he wants this to do to be. So we want the input to change based on whatever the person types in over here, like that. So how do we do that? So there's an onChange function, so we do that, and then we do an arrow function. This is ES6 syntax, and this gives us an event. And what we want to do with this event is get the value of that, which it gives us the value. So I'm just going to console.log it so you understand it. Console.log event. Just remove this. Okay. So whenever the value of the input changes, it's going to console.log us the event. So let me change the value. As you can see, everything is being changed. All the value is being changed, and it's console.logging it for us because we're doing onChange, passing the event, and then console.log the event. So as you can see, this is our event, right? And then we have a target. So where is it? Target, and then we have so many stuff over here. One of them is value. So if I control F value, as you can see, one second. Oh, it's over here. Yeah, so the value is SSS, whatever I typed in over here. So the value changes based. So now what we want to do is we want to change this input, the state input, based on the value of whatever the person typed in, which is going to be the value of the input. So whenever the input changes, the value of the input changes. Remember, it was e.target the value. So we want to do set input, call the function to change this state, and then we just want to pass in the value. So e.target.value. So now whenever I type in something, the value of this input changes, and then when it changes, this passes it into set input and changes the input, the state input. So now that we're done with that, we also want to, first I want to just show you something. So to make this code neater, we're going to use this extension if you've downloaded it. To make the code neater, we just have to do, if you're on Windows, do Alt Shift F, and if you're on MacBook, do Option Shift F, and that would make everything much neater. Okay, so now what we want to do is actually create the to-do when the person clicks enter on the input or clicks this button. So first thing we need to do is give this button a type, which is going to be the submit type. So it's a submit type for the form, and we want to do on submit, so we check if the person has submitted the form, which is either going to be by clicking enter when writing inside the input, or clicking the button, which is type submit for the form. And okay, so on submit, we want to call a function, which we are going to create right now. So we're going to call that function, also do const handle submit. So the function is going to be handle submit, and it's going to be an arrow function, so like that. And this is going to take an event, so e, and then so on submit we just want to call this function, so handle submit. So we're expecting an event because when we submit is the event, so it should pass in an event. So you could do over here, you could call it whatever you want, this variable. So it could be event, it could be e, up to you. But something is going to be passed in, and it's going to be the event of the submit. So what we want to do is event.prevent default. So prevent. So if we don't do this, we'll get an error, and I'll explain why. So prevent default just cancels the event of the submit. So the default event of the submit. So it won't occur. So basically, when a form is submitted, I think it refreshes the page. So this just stops it from refreshing, because then all of our state will be deleted unless we use Redux persist. But I'm not going to use Redux in this course. I'm just going to use normal state, reactjs, and that's it. Okay. So when we create a to-do, when we submit the form and we create a to-do, we need to set the input back to nothing, and so we need to set the input back to nothing. So when a user types in the to-do, so he can create a new to-do after it. So I want to set the input, the value of it, back to nothing. So we'll do set input back to an empty string. And so now to actually add the to-do. So let's go to app.js, and we're going to make a function called onSubmit. So let's do that. Const, or call it add to-do. And we'll make it an arrow function, and this will take in the text of the to-do, and now we'll actually create the to-do. But before we do that, I just want to pass it into the, so we can pass in props to components. So this to-do form is our component, and you can pass in props. So it could be like a variable or a function or whatever you want. So I'm just going to pass it in as add to-do. So they're just like passing in variables to a function, kind of. So we're passing in props. So add to do, and we'll just when he calls this add to do, we're passing in a function. So we're going to pass in add to do, and then we can get this prop inside to do form by doing props over here, and then we can do it like that, and then do props, and then we can call the function by props dot add to do, like that, or we can do it like this. Object destructuring like this, and then do add to do, and when you do this, that means you can just take whatever you want from props when you do these curly braces, and then or you can do props, so just take it in as props like the first time, and do object destructuring over here, so like this const, and then like that, and then whatever the prop is, so add to do, and then this equals to props. You can do it 3 ways. So I'm just going to do props for now. This is the simplest way, so you can understand. And then I'm going to call that add to do function, so in app.js that we passed in, and that so I'm going to call it so props.add to do, and then when I do that, when I call that add to do, I want to pass in whatever the person put inside the input, which is when the value of the input changes, we set the input state, we set it to the value of this input. So basically whatever's inside the input, whatever the person wrote, is stored inside our input variable, our input state. So we just want to pass in the state, so input state. And then in app.js, so the input state is going to be the text, so it's going to pass it into the text, and now whatever the person wrote will be text for us, and we can use that now. We can use this text to create our to-do. So the first thing we want to do is, so the to-do is going to have an ID, and the to-do is going to have some text, and it's going to have completed. So the ID is going to be, so we can find so when the person wants to delete a to-do or complete a to-do, we need to first find that to-do by the ID. So each one has to have a specific ID. So the first thing I want to do is give ID equal to 1. And we're also going to have a state over here, so we'll do const array, to-dos. So over here we're going to be storing our to-dos in this state, and we can do a function set to-dos to change the to-dos, just like I explained for inside to-do form where we did the input. So set to-dos, and we'll do the useState hook, React hook. And now we're going to set it to an empty array, because to-dos is going to be an array of to-dos. So we also need to import useState from React, so import useState from React, and useState over here. I'm just going to put this at the top. You don't have to, but I just like to do that. And remember to clean this code, Alt Shift F if you're on Windows, and Option Shift F if you're on Mac. So just clean it up a little bit. And okay, so we're setting the ID as 1, and now so we're setting the ID as 1 if it's the first to do. So if there's no to dos, then the first one is going to have an ID of 1. Otherwise, we want to check if the to dos dot length. So we're checking how many to dos there are. So to dos dot length. So the to dos is the to dos in state, and we're checking the length of it. So how many things there are inside the array, the length of the array. We're checking if the to dos dot length is bigger than 0. Then what we want to do is we want to change the ID, because there already is a to do with the ID of 1, and we want each one to have a unique ID. So what we want to do is change the value of ID. So ID is going to equal to dos, and we're going to get the first element of the to do, and we're going to get the ID of that, and plus 1, because we're getting the first element because that's going to be the newest to do. So I'll show you why. When we actually change the to dos, when we create a new to do, we're going to put it at the beginning of the array, so we know that is the newest to do, and then we'll just get the ID of that and add 1 to it, which would be our new to do ID. So this will make sense in a bit. So now let's actually make the to-do object. So our to-do, so we're going to let to-do equals an object, and this object, just like I said, is going to have an ID and some text of the to-do, and completed is going to be set to false. So the first thing is going to be the ID, and we're going to set it to the ID of what we just done. So it's either going to be 1 if it's the first to-do, or if there already is to-dos, we're going to get the newest to-do, which is going to have the biggest ID, and then we're just going to add 1 to that and give it to the new one. So that's going to be the ID, and then the text of that to-do is going to be set to the text that is being passed in from to-do form, so whatever the person put in the input. So I'm just going to explain this again. So on change, so when the value of this input changes, we want to do set input, change the state to the value of that whatever the person wrote, and then when the person clicks enter on this input or clicks the button to submit to the form, so on submit, handle submit, and then this calls the add to do and passes in the input, which is the state, which is what the person wrote, and then that passes it into this add to do function, and this add to do function gets called, and the input is being named as the text variable. So whatever the person put is going to be stored inside text variable, and then we put it as the text of the to do. And we're also going to have completed, and we're going to set that to false. So the complete is either going to be true or false. If it's true, we're going to have a strike through on the text. If it's false, it's just going to be normal. So now that we've actually created our to-do, we want to set the to-dos. So we want to put this to-do inside to-dos. So how do we do that? So we do set to-dos, and then we want to put an array. And that array is going to, just like I said, we're going to be pushing in the to-do as the first element of the array. So as the first variable of the array, first object of the array. So we can easily find the biggest ID and +1 to it. So to do that, we make an array, and we do to-do, so our new to-do, pass it in at the beginning of the array, and then we just want to get a copy of the to-dos state. So we want to get a copy of the to-do state and put it inside the array. So this array is going to contain the new to-do plus the old to-dos, and the new to-do is going to be at the beginning. Okay, so we can also do it this way, set to-dos and then just pass in the to-do, but that would add it at the end of the array, but we want it at the beginning, so we can just find the biggest ID and +1 to it. So that's why I'm putting it, that's why I'm doing it this way. So I'm putting the to-do first and then getting a copy of the state to-dos and adding it inside the array. Okay, so I'm just going to take this array that we've done. Sorry, it's meant to be to-do. I'm just going to get this array and then put it inside the variable, and then so let new to-dos equals, put that, and then I'll just pass new to-dos. So this is much neater. Okay, so let's just console.log new to-dos, see if it's right. So if it's actually adding the to-dos, the new to-do with the to-dos, the old to-dos. So whenever I add a to-do, it should console.log it. So let's see. So if I refresh, add a to-do, let's check out console now. Console, as you can see, we have an array which has our to-dos. So this is our to-do that I just added. If I add another to-do, it's getting my old to-do from the state and adding my new to-do. So the state is getting it from here and adding it with a new to-do and putting it inside an array. Okay, so it should all be working. So now let's actually display these to-dos, because now we're adding them. So now let's actually display them. So to display them, we want to make a new component called to-do item. So let's go to our components folder and then make a new file, and we'll call it to-do item.js. And so I'm going to make another functional component, so RFC, and now I have a functional component. And now in app.js, for each to-do, I want to use a to-do item component. So I want to display the to-do using the to-do item component. So now for each to-do I make, so for each one there is a state. So for all the to-dos, so for each one I just want to display a to-do item, and then I'll pass in the to-do, and over there I'll just display the name, make that card that you saw, that blue card, and give it those delete buttons and complete buttons. So I'm going to open up these, and then inside it I'm going to do to-dos.map, so the to-dos from state, this one. I'm going to do .map, so I'm going to map over them for each one. And then this is going to give me an arrow, so I can do an arrow function, and it will give me the to-do for each one, and then do an arrow function. And for each one I just want to return a to-do item for each one. So to-do item the component that we just made. So I'm going to click enter and that would automatically import it for me. If it doesn't, just do import to do item from the path, which is /components /to do item. So to do item, and then I'm going to close the tags, and then I want to pass in the to do as a prop. And then so I go to do item, and remember, just like I said, we can receive the props like that, and then we can use it doing props.todo. So I'm just going to display the to do, so props.todo, and remember, to do is an object that contains an ID and text and completed. So I'm just going to display the text for each one. So let's see how it's working now. As you can see, we have a few to dos. If I add another one, sorry, there we go. If I add some more, as you can see, it's adding the to do over here. So now I want to display it like really nice. So I'm just going to use my class names from app.css. So I'm just going to give this to do a class name of to do row, which is one of the classes that I've implemented in app.css. So as you can see now, all my to dos are being over here, as you can see. So if I do this, add to do, and oh, also remember when I said that whenever the user adds a to do, I want to set the input back to nothing. So I want to change the value. So if I go to do form, I want to give this input a value, and that value is equal to the input from state, because after I add a to do, I'm setting it back to nothing. So I want to also set the value of this input back to nothing. So now if I add a to do, as you can see, this goes back to nothing. Okay, so as you can see, it's being displayed really nicely. Now I want to implement the remove to do and complete to do. So let's get the remove to do icon from React Icons. So let's actually go ahead and install React Icons. So open up a new terminal, npm install React Icons, and then we need to do -s, which means save. I'll explain that later. Okay, so while React Icons is actually installing, I just want to show you something. So if I go to app.js and to do item, so I'm giving, for each to do, I'm giving it a to do item component that we just created, and I just want to show you something. So if I go open the console, as you can see, we are getting some errors over here. So each child in the list should have a unique key prop. So to fix that, we just need to give this a key, and that key is going to be based on the to do ID. So each to do item is going to have a different ID, a different key. So if I refresh, the errors are gone. Okay, so now that we have installed React Icons, let's actually use the icons in our to do item. So let me just show you where you can find all these icons. So if I go to React Icons, and then as you can see over here we have React Icons. So if I click on that, over here you can search for all the icons. So you can do, for example, check, and that would give you all the check icons, and there's so many. So right now we want to delete icons, so just search delete. As you can see, there's so many delete icons. So there's one specific one that I want, so let me just go and get that. So the one I want is close circle line. So close circle line. Yeah, this one. This is the one that I want. So I copied it to clipboard, and now we can actually use it. So if I go to do item, I need to put it inside the to do row. So if I do Ctrl V, and then like that. So now I actually have this, but I need to import this. So to import this, I do import, and then open these, Ctrl V, from. So you import it from React Icons, and then slash whatever the first two letters are. So ri/ri, React Icons/ri. There's so many. So if I search for delete, as you can see, there's AI, MD, RI, TI. There's so many. So I'm just going to use the RI. So I'm using RI closed circle line. So I need to do it from RI. Okay. So now that I've done this, I want to wrap this inside a div, because for styling purposes. And this div is going to have a class name, which is equal to icons container. And this icon is also going to have a class name which is equal to icon. It just makes it white, I think. And let me see. So it just makes it, yeah, it just makes it white. That's it. So okay, so now if I save this and go back to the website, cannot resolve. So sometimes when you install a new dependency, just like such as React Icons, you need to restart your app. So just run npm start again like this. Npm start. enter, and that should let you run it. Okay, so it's already running for me, so I don't need this. So as you can see, I have it here. So now if I add a to do, so click do now, should have the icon over there. As you can see, we have the X icon. So now when the user clicks this icon, I want to delete this to do. So let's go ahead and do that. So if I go to do item and on click, so when the user clicks on the icon, I want to implement an arrow function, and then this arrow function just calls. So I'm going to get props dot remove to do. I'm going to be passing in a function just like I passed it in for to do form when we did add to do. So I'm going to do the same thing for remove to do. So on click, we don't need this arrow function. We could just do remove to do. Just call props dot remove to do like that, and then I can go to app.js and I need to pass in remove to do. So for each one, I need to pass in remove to do equals remove to do, just like we done for the add to do over here. And I need to make this remove to do function now. So just make it. So const remove to do equals arrow function, and we need to pass in the to do. So we'll be receiving an ID of that to do, so we can actually filter the to dos and not put in the, or remove the to do with that ID. So over here we need to pass in to do.id. So props.todo.id, because we have it's getting passed in as props. So you're gonna have to keep doing props.props. So the best way to do this is const object destructuring. So we'll do this. So we'll do to do equals props, and now over here, instead of doing props.todo.text, we can just do to-do.text, and same thing here. And as for props.remove to do, we can also do that as well. So remove to do, and now we don't need the props dot, we can just use remove to do. So we're just taking remove to do from props and also taking to do from props. Okay, so now we're passing in the ID. Now if we go to do form, sorry, app.js, so and then over here it's calling this function, and we're getting the ID of the to do. So now what we want to do is make a new array called updated to dos, and we're going to set that to, we're going to get a copy of the state, so of the to dos, all of the to dos, and then we're going to do the filter function on it. So we'll do .filter, and then that's going to give us a to do for each one. So we can do arrow function. You could do a normal function as well, but it's better to do arrow functions. So we can do an arrow function and get the to do, and then we want to do to-do.id is not equal to id. So if the ID of this to do is not equal to the ID that we have just received, then we'll return this to do, and it will be stored in update to do. So that way all the to dos will be returned to updated to dos and will be stored in here, other than the one with the ID that it wants to be removed. So it will be removed that way. And now I want to set to dos, the state, this, and just pass in updated to dos. So now the other to do is gone. So now if I save this and I remove the to do, so if I refresh, we don't need to refresh, but add the to do, there's an issue. So let's check that issue. So let's go to inspect element. So I'm keeping these issues inside the tutorial because debugging is a big part of web development, so I'm going to keep it here. So cannot update a component app while rendering a different component to do item. To locate the bad set state, call inside to do item, follow the stack trace as described. So the issue is, it's got to do with removing a to do, because it's said bad set state, which is the set to dos that we just added, and so it's got to do with the remove to do basically. So let's just double check our code. So we have const remove to do, this is let. That should be right. This should be right. So let's go to do item. Oh, okay, so we need to do this as an arrow function because we're passing in a to do ID. So like that. Now let's see if the error is fixed. So continue, for example, add to do. As you can see now it's working. So now if I remove a to do, there we go, it works. Any errors? Let's check. No errors. Perfect. So now let's go on to completing a to do. So let's go to our to do item.js, and let's add the icon. So we're gonna have, let's see what icon we want to use. So let's go to React icons and search check, and we'll just use, for example, this one, bi check circle. I like this one. So Control V, close it. We need to import this as well. So remember how I said we need to import it from React icon / the first two letters. So Control V from React icons / so we have BI over here, so we need to do /BI, and now let's see if it's working. So there we go. Now we have the icon here. This is the check icon. I just want some spacing between these two icons, so I'm just going to give this this delete one a style. So I'll give style equals pass in an object margin. So styling is pretty much like CSS. So margin to the right. So margin right, and I'll give it 5. So if you do 5, it automatically takes it as pixels. You could put it in a string and do 5 pixels, or no, there's no issues with that. But you could just do 5, and that would fix it, and that would do pixels. There we go. So now we have some margin between them, much better. Okay, so now let's implement this complete to do. So we want to do the same thing. So also want to give this class name icon. We don't really need to because it's already white. So even the delete one, because the icon is just making it white. So we don't need that, do we? Yeah, we don't. So we can also delete that from app.css, this icon. So to do item, now we can do onClick, call it arrow function, and then complete to do, which we're going to pass in as props. So, and we'll also want to pass in the ID, just like we done with the remove to do, and we're going to receive it from props. So we have an error right now. That's because we're not passing in the prop. So let's actually do that. So let's go to app.js, and then complete to do. To do is equal to complete to do, and we need to actually implement this. So let's do this. Const Control V equals arrow function. We're going to be taking an ID, so we can filter, so we can find the to do and then update that specific one. So let's start implementing this complete to do. So just to check if we're getting the ID. So let's actually console.log the ID when we click the complete button. So let's check that. So if I refresh, inspect element, console, other to do, click that complete button, and just check out info. As you can see, we are getting it. So it's console logging the ID. So this console log, we can remove it. It's from add to do. Yeah, we don't need that, and we don't need this console log anymore. So now let's actually complete to dos. So let's make a new variable called updated to dos, and for this one we're going to map on all the to dos in state. So all of our to dos, and for each one to do arrow function, and then what we want to do is check if the to do .id is equal to this ID. So if this to do, the ID of this to do is equal to this ID, then that's the to do that we want to update. We want to make it as completed. So we found the to do now. Then now what we want to do is that we want to do completed, and we want to set that to not to do completed. So whatever it was, so this is basically toggling it, not really completing it. So if it was completed, then we'll do not, so it means the opposite of what it was. So if it was true, it'll make it false. If it was false, it'll make it true. Okay, so then after that, after we do the if statements, we need to return to do, return it back to the updated to dos. So now updated to dos should have our updated to dos, and then we want to set state, set to dos, and pass in the updated to dos. Okay, so it should be working, but we need to actually change. We want to give it a strike through. So if the to do is actually completed, we want to give it a strike through. So how do we do that? So we'll go to this div class name, and what we want to do is do this. So do it like this, so we can actually. Otherwise, if you do a string, then you can't actually use variables. So we want to use the variables to check if the to do is completed. So we'll do to do dot completed, and then we can do this, the question mark, and if it is completed, so and then we'll have a colon and do this. So if it is completed, then our classes are going to be to do row, and so to do row is our main class, and then we'll also have a completed class. Otherwise, if it is completed, and then we do colon, which means otherwise, If it's not completed, then we'll just do to-do row. So it will be as if it's a normal to-do. But let me just check if the class is actually completed, because let me just see. To-do row complete, sorry, not completed. So it just gives it text decoration line through, so it strikes through the text. So complete. So now we're just basically checking if the to-do is completed, then we give it the class complete. And if it's not completed, then we'll just keep it as to-do row. So now let's see if this is working. So let me refresh. Hello, to-do, complete. There we go, strike through. And then if I click it, it's not strike through because it set it back to false, so it's not completed. Okay, so now we're done with the tutorial, and we just want to have a HR over here aligned to separate between the form and the to-dos. So just go ahead and do that. This is just for styling purposes. So to-do form, under the to-do form, I want to do a HR, and I want to give it a class name of separator because I have made that class in app.css, so separator. Now if I refresh, as you can see, we have this separator, which is really nice. So now we can add to-dos successfully. We can complete them, uncomplete them, and we can remove them. Okay guys, I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial on how to make a to-do list with React.js. Please like and subscribe. Goodbye.